Welcome back to another edition of the Heart to Heart podcast. And my guest today is Greg Mushen. So Greg is a former tech guy who's now super into health. He's got an incredible Twitter account. I'm really excited to chat with him today. He's had an incredible body transformation where he shared a lot of his insights on Twitter. I think that have helped a lot of people. Anyways, Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So Greg, I know a little bit about you. Like I said, I know you're into tech, and now obviously you're, big time into your health. But for people who don't know you, maybe you can give the audience a little bit of a brief background about yourself.
Yeah. My name is Greg Mushen. As you said, I spent a long career in tech. Got interested in health actually at a pretty young age. I grew up in a medical family. My dad was an MD. My mom was a nurse. And so we were always kind of had exposure to it. Was always really fascinated with it. My dad would always perform these experiments when I was growing up. I remember the first one, I saw him testing his urine pH and was just really curious about that. I remember in the 90s, he ran an experiment trying to reduce his cholesterol. At the time, it was during a time when we thought like all fat would lead to high cholesterol. And so he eliminated fat from his diet. I think he had about a gram of fat in a month.
Wow.
Which didn't turn out well, as you might imagine. But that, so really kind of seeded my interest there. And my dad was always really encouraging. He would never really oversimplify things for me. He'd always be really generous in his explanations. But got a really early interest in nutrition and health, basically just from looking at him as an example. He was always really fit. He's a runner, always trying to improve something or other. So that's kind of like where I got my start. Would read nutrition books, when I was in my teens through my 20s. Was always really focused on that. But as you might imagine, sometimes in tech, it can be difficult to stay on track, especially when you're working, at a startup or something like that, that kind of takes most of your energy. In around, I think it was about 2018, I just finished, a couple years at a really high growth startup. And once I left, I realized how much I'd sacrificed my health. I had some blood work done and my HSCRP was just off the charts. And I knew I needed to never let that happen again and, really, really focus in. Fast forward to 26, I guess it was in 2016, I had my daughter. I had her when I was 40 years old. And that really got me thinking too. I need to be around for her for a while. And I went to a wedding once and the bride was in her 40s. And she paused for a little bit because her dad wasn't there to walk her down the aisle. And that really, really hit me. And I just thought at that moment, I never want that to happen to my daughter. I want to be around as long as I possibly can. And so that's when it really kicked things into gear. And I really decided to start working on building muscle mass. For a long time in health, that wasn't really, we didn't know how important it was. I would say until pretty recently, where we've known all the benefits, and so that's when I started a transformation. Lost a lot of body fat, gained as much muscle as I could, and then started posting on X just about the transformation, about different things that I was doing. I noticed that it seemed to help a lot of people, particularly I would say like older people.
Yeah, like the picture you have, the before and after, when you said like you kind of did this transformation at 47 is just incredible. It's things are pinned tweet. So anyone who wants to, look at it, they can go see it right now. Your Twitter is just at Greg Mushen, I think.
At Greg Mushen.
Yeah. And so like, what were like the biggest levers that you used to like achieve that transformation at 47 years old?
Yeah, so I got a coach, my friend John. I'd gone to a birthday party with him and our friend PJ. PJ, he's also an ex. He's 10 years older than me. And so at the time he was 57 and he is just like in incredible shape. He probably looks about 20 years younger. you wouldn't believe that he was 57. But we all decided to enter this body transformation contest together. And PJ has been a lifelong trainer. John is a triathlete. And so they both were coaching me. So it started with just macros, getting the macros right, getting, a gram of protein per pound body weight, increasing walking. We did a slight deficit. So I think it was about 300 calorie deficit. So not that big. But
and with the macros, what else, like in terms of like the fats and like the carbohydrates? Like I know that you obviously said you're going for a gram of protein per pound of body weight, but like were you going more like keto, or were you going more like, high carb after your workouts, but lower carb during the day, or kind of just like a mix? Like how did you?
It was a mix. One thing I noticed was how important carb timing was for me.
Okay.
If I felt depleted, because I was pretty low carb most of the time, but I would go to the gym, and when you're on the calorie deficits, kind of extreme calorie deficits, you can go in there and just kind of feel a little flat. So one thing that really helped me was just getting carb timing right. So I'd have some honey, like a tablespoon or two of honey before I went to go work out. That made a really big difference for me. So yeah, I would try to time carbs around the workouts. That seemed to work pretty well for me. In both,
and what time of the day did you usually work out?
At the time, I was working, so it'd usually be kind of any time of the day. For me, for whatever reason, I tend to do a little bit better in the afternoons. I know we're all pretty different, but that seems to be when I have the most energy for workout and can really put my all into it.
Okay. And so you said that like you focused on carb timing. So, using a little bit of honey or, at least some kind of carbs before workout seems like increase your overall performance. But did you then have more carbs after your workouts as well to kind of like replenish glycogen and just kind of feel better overall? Or what was your strategy there?
Yeah, I would also have some carbs after workout. Nothing crazy. Maybe it was like a banana, a cup of frozen blueberries, something like that. But that seemed to help too, just a little bit.
So that's it. Hey, just a little bit of honey before and then some fruit after. Like you didn't have any starches like rice, potatoes, nothing like that.
Yeah. At the time, I remember it being pretty hard for me to get, all the calories in with carbs. So yeah, I didn't have too many. I was at the time pretty low carb, just kind of time things around the workouts.
Okay. And then I think you said like you started off just doing, I think about 3 strength training workouts a week, and then you were incorporating walking as well. Is that right?
Yeah. I started out pretty small at the time. It'd been a while since I'd done much of any strength training. And so I started pretty slow. It was just like 3, full body workouts per week. And gradually ramped that up once I kind of built that habit. And then for steps, I remember John telling me, get at least 10,000 steps per day. And so I asked him, what if I got 17,000? Would that be better? He was like, yeah, absolutely. If you could do 17,000, that'd be amazing. And I think that to me was probably one of the biggest changes. I remember 11 days in, I was starting to see, abs peek through. It was just incredible. But
and so how many steps were you doing previously before your transformation?
It was, probably around 8,000, 8,000. I would walk, but I hadn't yet really discovered just kind of like the power of walking and how good it was for you. But when I started doing kind of the high volume, that's where it really changed my mind. It's almost like I could feel, just the fat melting off of me.
And so how do you manage to get in so many steps a day? Like 17,000 seems like, I guess unrealistic for some people, or just hard to like achieve,
Yes.
So like, how did you manage to get that into your routine?
At the beginning, I would just kind of brute force it. I would actually go on like really long walks. Just after work, I would take a couple hours and just knock them all out in one go. So I did that for a couple months, and at the end of the body transformation competition, I was realizing that that's pretty unsustainable, that I couldn't keep that up in these, big long blocks. So I actually bought an under desk treadmill and started using that. And that was amazing because I could do it while I was doing other stuff like working. And so the following summer, I did another cut and I did almost all of my steps on the under desk treadmill. And it was pretty incredible because I could get to 12,000 steps even just before noon. And then, with other steps that I just got through the day, I wouldn't have to really think about it too much. And at the beginning, I remember how self-conscious I was because I'd be in meetings and, walking on this treadmill. And I thought, everybody was going to think I was really weird and give me a hard time about it. But what I noticed was the opposite. People were like, "Oh, are you on a treadmill right now?" And it's a yes. They're like, "That is such a great idea. I want to do that too." And before I knew it, I started seeing more and more people during meetings with their standing their treadmill under their desk. So that was awesome. Pretty cool to see.
So you kind of started a trend there. And with regards to the treadmill, like, was it the under the desk treadmill? Was it difficult to like get used to in terms of like, did you find that it was hard to work and use a treadmill at the same time? And then also to what speed did you have it on, just out of curiosity?
At the beginning, I found it incredibly difficult because I was trying to work and, type and respond to emails once I started doing it. And after a while, I just kind of said, I'm going to give up on that. I'll just do it during meetings because I don't have to type. It's a lot easier. And that worked out really well. At the time, I had a lot of meetings. So I would get a lot of walking in. At the beginning, I started pretty slow. It was like 2 miles per hour. But as I got, more used to it, I started ramping that up. And last summer, I actually made a 4-degree incline on it and then would go at about between 3 and 3.5 miles per hour. I didn't want to be sweating a lot while I was in meetings. So I would kind of take it right to that point where I wouldn't be sweating, that much.
Yeah. So just enough so that you were, or I guess the maximum amount that you could, ramp it up to before you kind of started to break a sweat, more or less.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of the steps though themselves, like, I haven't, I guess, investigated this for whatever reason, but it would seem like if you're taking a step when you're standing up, it would require a lot more energy than say if you're just taking a step when you're sitting down. Like, is that correct, or do you just kind of see them both as the same?
Well, I had a standing desk, so I was doing all of these standing.
Oh, you're doing all of it standing.
All of it standing. Yeah.
Okay, that's crazy. So you were standing up going on an incline of 4 at 3 to 3.5 miles an hour. That's pretty wild. And so you would do that then for like hours in a day, or like, would you take breaks with it, or?
Yeah, I would take breaks. So, I might have like a half-hour meeting. I would do that. And then I'd take a break, but just 4 of those and you're pretty much at 17,000 steps or sometimes even more. So, I found the breaks really helpful. Just because it seems so much more doable. You just go into a meeting, you knock a half hour out, go do something else. And, before you know it, at lunch, you're at your step target.
That's wild. And then the first few weeks that you were doing the transformation, I think you had mentioned on Twitter that you did find it to be a little bit difficult. So like, what was going through your head and how did you manage to get through those first few weeks?
Yeah, it was difficult because I was changing so many habits at once. One of the things that I needed to get in the habit of doing was tracking food. So I remember that even just that alone, I felt like it took me about 6 weeks or so to really reduce the cognitive load. At the beginning, it was just really difficult. And then making sure that I got my macros right, kind of figuring out, what I could eat. It was actually quite a bit of cognitive overhead. But at the 6-week mark, it seemed to like really reduce, and I wasn't thinking about it too much. It was just kind of like automatic. And I had most of the things in there that I was, eating every day. So I would just copy from the previous day, made it really easy.
So yeah, I always found that too. Like when you're able to eat more or less the same foods every day, then, it just makes things a whole lot easier. And, for people who say like, I can't eat the same thing every day, like I get it, but also too, you can also just like switch it up, meaning like, at dinner time, you can just have, ground beef instead of, chicken, or chicken instead of ground beef, or venison, or whatever it is that you want. And like, the macros are going to change maybe a little bit there, but not like that much, especially if you're getting like extra lean ground beef. And then if you want to change like the taste of it, you can just add spices,
Yeah,
and different
exactly.
spices like drastically, change the taste of it. Same with sauces. If you get like some low calorie sauces, that'll change the taste of it too. So yeah, I always felt like that was like a major advantage or a hack for, people. And I do find that a lot of people who are, really into health, they do tend to eat a lot of the same foods all the time anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that advice. I think that can be, a cheat code, especially with something like ground beef, because it's so versatile. I mean, you can throw taco seasoning in it, and
Yeah, that makes it
Mexican.
awesome. Yeah.
You can put some tomato sauce in it. You could have it, over a little rice, and get some sauces from Costco. So it's just so versatile. But yeah, if people have a problem with eating the same thing every day, it can be easy to switch it up. So you kind of keep the base protein the same, and then what you're varying is just the spices. Or another trick that I like as well is Greek yogurt, and then you can just get different flavored protein powders and mix that in. So
Yeah,
that can be really good.
I've been doing that lately as well. And another thing I've been doing there is like I do, we'll talk about LDL a little bit as well, like a little bit later. I wanted to ask you about that, but like, that's how I usually get my psyllium husk in, or that's what I've been doing and how I've been doing it lately. Because I do
Oh, that's a
believe,
great idea.
that, psyllium husk, I mean, I'm not sure if you saw that like 2014 meta-analysis where it was like, 10 grams of psyllium husk a day can decrease your all-cause mortality by 10%. And like,
Oh my gosh,
you
that's
know,
incredible.
it's wild. And like we have mechanisms of action as for why that would, make sense. It clearly lowers your LDL, clearly lowers your blood sugar, clearly increases your satiety. So like there's so many things there. And like I get it, when people say, Greek yogurt isn't that filling, but if you add in like a little bit of fats, like sometimes even like almond butter you can throw in there if you want, or like whatever your favorite nut butter is, and then you add in a little bit of psyllium husk, and then you got like a full meal. Then you have your protein, you have your fats, and then you have your fiber. And so and it's easy, right? It's not time consuming at all. It takes like 2 seconds to do that.
Yeah.
It's super
Yeah.
versatile.
Oh, I love that. I'm gonna have to try that psyllium husk in the Greek yogurt. I haven't tried that yet, but I bet that's really good.
It's really good, especially that one, like I'm not even sure if I'm saying it right, the oikois or whatever, like the one that they're making with stevia these days. There's like 18 grams of protein and like 6 grams of carbs and no fat in a serving. So it's pretty wild, like how good like the macronutrients are on that.
That's amazing. Yeah, and fiber is one of those just magic things, especially something like psyllium husk, because it does really impact your satiety a lot.
Big time. And yeah, just before we actually get into LDL, there was one tweet that I think that you had tweeted out that I really liked. And it says, when I felt hungry, I reframed it as a feeling of fat melting off. That mindset shift changed everything. So
Oh
maybe you
yeah.
can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I loved that. I actually remember the time when I noticed this, and it was summer in Seattle. It was during my first cut, and I was taking these really long walks. And summers in Seattle are just absolutely beautiful. So the sun was out. I was walking around Green Lake, which is this lake that's kind of in the middle of the city. Could feel the warmth of the sun, but I had this hunger, and I don't know why I associate with that, but I think it's because, I was starting to see abs, and I was just like, I can almost feel the fat melting off my body. And it was such a transitional period, because once I reframed that hunger as like progress, whenever I felt that hunger, I was like, it's working. It's working. Yeah, the fat is coming off.
Like when I read that on Twitter, like what I thought of too is like, when I have some patients who are going through like some kind of like detox or withdrawing from drugs, that means that like you are getting rid of the drug, like when you're detoxing, whether it's from alcohol or opioids or whatever, and you're going through withdrawals, like that means your body is trying to adjust,
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I read that on Twitter, I kind of felt like that's sort of, kind of the same thing with people who are used to sort of, just feeding themselves whenever they feel any kind of hunger signal. So like when we're going through that, it seems like that was just you training your body, like, okay, like I don't need to necessarily eat right now just because I feel hungry. I just need to kind of like learn to train my brain to, get through some of these periods. And then over time, I can train my brain where I'm able to, stave off some of these like hunger pangs that I have.
Yeah, it became this kind of signal of progress for me. And when I'd feel that, I started to actually feel motivated, and I would be like, "Oh, let's go on a walk," and I would feel it a little bit more. But I think that probably I don't know if I would have had that same feeling if I hadn't been seeing the progress. And a big part of that to me was taking daily progress pics. That was just pivotal because if you're looking at yourself in the mirror every day, it's hard to see the progress just because you get so used to it. But if you can compare a picture of, today versus last week, when you start getting lean, you can notice that difference and you're like, oh, wow, this ab is a little bit more defined or, things like that. So I think that if you can see the progress, either through the numbers on the scale, or if you have a body fat measurement scale, and in the visual progress, that's where you can really associate those changes.
And
with
it's easier. And it's easier to keep going then because you have motivation. You know that it's working.
It's working. You know that if you keep going for a couple more weeks, you're going to just look amazing. So these progress pics are just so important.
That's awesome. Well, I'm happy that you said that because I haven't really heard anyone, talk about it like that before, mentioning that, by looking in the mirror every day, you're not really getting like a good judgment of yourself. But if you actually take a picture and you look back, then, maybe you are seeing or will see some progress that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. That's kind of interesting. One thing I wanted to ask you about, as we just, mentioned earlier, LDL, and I know that there's, a lot of people now online, especially, I guess, in the carnivore community, maybe some other, communities where they're basically just saying that LDL doesn't matter. It's not associated with cardiovascular disease. I don't have that belief whatsoever. You don't have that belief. So what study or what made you believe that, we need to start lowering LDL?
I think the thing that really changed my mind was the Mendelian randomization trials in those studies. Because I think that, if you look at those, and for those that don't know, it's probably one of the best experiments that you could run because you remove all the confounders. So you basically pool, people at birth that have different genetics for how they're going to handle LDL, and then you just track them over the life. And and I'm sure you know this, but what those studies showed was that basically it came down to total exposure, total lifetime exposure, and that was the risk factor. So once I saw that, my mind was made up on the topic. Just like, okay, there's no more debating this as far as I'm concerned. And, I think that LDL is important. Arguably there are things that are higher risk factors like insulin resistance, high blood pressure, but that doesn't negate the importance of LDL as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the first person who put me on to that study was Lane Norton. And because he had also at one point, thought that, saturated fat wasn't a big deal. And I don't know if he thought that LDL wasn't a big deal. Maybe he did, or I'm not, 100% sure on that. But I remember him putting out that study and looking at it. And it was basically just like a straight line. And then the nice thing about that study, like you say, is that, it takes away all of the confounding variables. So, for people who aren't aware with what like a Mendelian randomization is, basically what they're doing is, as you mentioned, they're taking people from birth with certain genetic predispositions, and some people have predispositions where they're just barely, making any LDL, or will have very little LDL like their entire life, where some people will have, normal LDL, and then other people will have, significantly higher LDL. And so because, they have this kind of genetic thing that hasn't been changed, where they've been able to go back and look at them, over the time, what they found was that the people with the higher LDL just had significantly higher risk of cardiovascular disease overall. And then, like you said, it is just one cardiovascular risk factor. And so a lot of people who have this belief of, LDL is not something that needs to be looked at, or not something I should worry about, a lot of those people do have fairly good behaviors overall, and meaning that like most of their other risk factors are controlled. So, if all of your other risk factors are controlled, but LDL, then, overall, you're still going to be fairly low risk.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that, LDL still isn't a risk factor overall.
That's right.
Right. And so, I 100%, agree with you on that. And then, some people will note, and I will say too, ApoB probably is a little bit of a better biomarker than LDL, but I'll also say that, after seeing, I don't know how many thousands of patients of blood work I've seen, but I haven't, really come across too many people where they have, a very, like a sky high LDL and then a low ApoB. Usually, they're very rarely they're very highly correlated. Like I can't really think of one good example I've seen ever of that.
Yeah, the literature shows that too. They track so closely.
Yeah. So while I do think it is, good to get an ApoB, like it's not going to give you that much more predictive value than like an LDL overall, because they're both probably going to be very, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing that I wanted to ask about. So I actually had Nick Norwitz on the podcast maybe about a year ago or something like that, after he did that statin and Oreo study.
Oh yeah.
But I know that he, came out recently, basically saying that, CECO in some ways like doesn't matter. And I'm not sure exactly how he worded it, but calories in, calories out is, basically not the end all be all, or whatever, how he worded it. I obviously disagree with that as well. If you push calories too high, you are going to gain weight. If you reduce calories, to a lower your threshold, you will lose weight. Obviously, there's quite a bit of variable in there within what kind of calories you are consuming, but maybe we should explain to people, why should we never ignore calories in, calories out?
Yeah. You could think of almost calories in, calories out in energy balance as kind of the laws of physics in a lot of ways. And we know how well they track with weight loss and fat loss from all the metabolic ward studies that have been done, over the last 50 years. So calories are going to explain basically 90 to 95% of the weight loss, just that energy deficit. So, calories absolutely do matter. I going back to what Nick said, I think one of the things that he said that I disagreed with initially until I kind of reflected on what I think he meant, but he was saying that calories aren't, you can't predict it, that it's basically like a post-analysis is the only thing that's going to really explain it. And, I don't think that's right. I use this example to prove the point of this guy named Angus Barberi. And in 1965 in Scotland, he was incredibly overweight. I think he was over 400 pounds. And he went into his doctors. He tried all of this different stuff. And he just asked them, well, what if I just stop eating? And so they were like, okay, well, let's get you as an inpatient in the hospital. We want to monitor you. And I think they probably thought it was going to be, 3 days, but he ended up going 387 days without food. And they gave him electrolytes. They were, measuring his blood work, keeping a really close eye on him. But he was able to do that. But if you do the math and you start with his, likely base metabolic rate, his activity level, I just did a back of the napkin calculation just using the simple Kiko formula, and was able to predict when he would reach his target weight within a day. So it's remarkably accurate.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's insane. And that was just using the standard formulas. So it's really well known. It works. You can't really ignore it. There've been some questions. Well, does it really matter? If you have low carb or high carb. So that's been studied as well. There was this study that came out, I believe in 2016 from Kevin Hall. And he looked at 32 metabolic ward studies in a meta-analysis, and found that it didn't really make a difference as long as protein and calories were the same. But what I think Nick might have meant, and I know that he's going to put a piece out on this soon, and I think he is right about this, is that a lot of people find it hard to track calories and stick to that because their hunger isn't going to go away. And there's some in the keto community that have lost a ton of weight and they don't track calories and they're satiated. And I think for those people, like, more power to you. If you can find a way to control your satiation, without tracking calories, go for it. As long as your biomarkers are looking good. But I think that might be what Nick meant with that tweet, was that in a non-controlled setting, it's not predictive because you can't really determine how hungry somebody's going to be, and therefore they're just going to kind of overeat. So I do think that there's some credence to that as well. Is how do you control hunger? How do you stay within your goals and things like that?
Yeah, Dr. Ted Naiman, who I was, talking about just before we start the show, because I'm pretty sure he's from Seattle, same area you are. He was kind of saying that, like, what he doesn't tell people, how many calories to eat at the beginning, because he always just finds that if you give someone, a certain calorie amount, that they're going to eat until they're full anyway.
Right.
So he says, track what you're eating essentially, and figure out what makes you full, and then basically dial it back and try to do it that way so that you can have some understanding, before you go in as to, what is actually going to make you full, because if I have this arbitrary number of like 2,000 calories, then a lot of times people will hit that and then they're still hungry and then they continue to eat more. So again, there's no one way or perfect way to do this. Like, it's always going to be a bit of a challenge when you're trying to, change your lifestyle or change your eating habits and reduce your overall caloric intake. And I mean, if you're not tracking your calories at all and you're gaining weight, like, you're probably going to be so surprised by how many calories that you are eating, and especially if you're drinking calories, like for people who are drinking like, regular Coke. I mean, it's amazing how many calories you can put back. Or even if you're just drinking like, a ton of orange juice, which again is like sometimes like in some circles kind of still touted as like a health food. And, I'm not saying that you should never have it, but I would probably only have it like a little bit after I worked out, kind of something like that, or maybe before workout. But, I wouldn't be, I think the first thing, you should do when you're trying to track calories or reduce your calories is just eliminate your drinking calories, because those are not going to make you feel full whatsoever. And then also to look at your fiber intake, because if you're low in fiber, you're probably not going to feel that full. I mean, obviously some people in the keto or carnivore community would, disagree with that. And, again, more power to them if they're able to, feel full without having any fiber in their diet. Although I do think that, not having any fiber in your diet, regardless of, what your body composition is, probably is going to have some kind of detrimental effect in the long term.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I was actually going to ask you that question, like, who should and shouldn't eat a ketogenic diet?
I think diets are just so personal. I know some people do really well on them, and it crushes their hunger. They lose weight. For me, I don't really feel that. I tend to do better with a little higher carb for whatever reason, and that seems to satiate me. I'll eat like complex carbs, not cereal or anything like that.
What kind of complex carbs do you eat, and do you eat them after your workouts?
Yeah. So I'll eat sweet potatoes. I love sweet potatoes. Those are great. I usually heat and cool them because then you can get also the resistant starch, which is really good.
Same with rice too, as well, correct?
Rice as well. Yeah. And it's
so
probably
maybe explain to people why that's so beneficial, like the heat and the cooling.
yeah. So what will happen is these starches when you heat them and cool them, they'll retrograde and they'll turn into something that's called resistant starch. And resistant starch, where the resistant comes from, is it's resistant to digestion, and so it'll pass through without digestion. Once it gets into your gut, your microbiome will start fermenting these starches, and it'll create acetate, propionate, and butyrate. And those short chain fatty acids are really important for signaling in the gut. So one of the things that it will signal is called HDAC, and that will kind of determine how tight your junctions in your gut are. So the more HDAC inhibition you have, the tighter those junctions will be. And the other thing that's really relevant to hunger and satiation is it will activate FFAR2 and FFAR3, and those will go into a cascade that ultimately activates GLP-1 and PYY. And so those can really help with satiation. So just incredibly important, I think, to get enough fermentable fiber. We tend to think of fiber as just something that's going to, be kind of roughage or things that, help you poop better. But it's so much more. That fermentable fiber, I personally just think is kind of magic.
And for the heating and cooling, like how long does that have to be? Like, do you freeze some of your foods and like kind of batch things out for the week, or can you just get it just from, say, cooling it in the refrigerator for half hour, an hour? Like, what's the actual time?
I can't remember the actual time. I usually do it overnight.
Okay.
If you do it overnight, you'll be totally within range. But it does have to cool down for, I think it's like 4 to 6 hours, is if I recall correctly. But once you do that, it's stable. You can heat it back up, and it'll be completely stable. So it can be great. You can just kind of batch cook, a bunch of sweet potatoes, or beans are another one that will have it. I love Great Northern beans because they're really high in potassium as well. And so I'll make this chili, with ground beef and tomato sauce, refrigerate that. Beans will have the same thing with resistant starch. Rice, basmati is probably the best for resistant starch. That's the highest.
Like white basmati rice, or
white basmati. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't even know if it's actually even is brown basmati. Maybe that's.
I've never seen it. Come to think of it, I'm sure it's out there.
But you would prefer that, like, over, say, like wild rice or brown rice, even though that has it's not that much, but it usually has like 2 or 3 grams of fiber versus the white rice usually I think has 0. But you would still prefer the white basmati rice over that?
I think so. I love wild rice as well. But yeah, I probably still prefer the white basmati, and it'll really help with glucose control too. And so if you have a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, you can test this. So you can try it just regular rice, which has a tendency to pretty much spike glucose in everyone. And then you can try it when you've heated and cooled it, and you should see a reduction in that area under the curve.
That's awesome. And it's also convenient too, because I do the same thing. Like, it sounds like you do a lot of batch cooking, and I do a lot of like batch cooking. So, Sunday to Thursday, like those 5 days, I basically have, the same meal every single night, except for, like I said, I may change up the spices, or I might change up the sauces, or, I might put some guacamole on it, a few nights. Sometimes I do that actually more often than not. So, it makes things just so much easier when you can do that. And obviously, like, it's not time consuming, because you come home and all I do is just take it out of the freezer, put it in the microwave for, 3 or 4 minutes, and then bang, like I'm basically done, So it's cool that you like you get the convenience effect, but then also too, you get this great like nutritional effect because you're creating resistant starches. Whereas if you were, just cooking the rice every single night, you wouldn't get that effect.
Yeah. It just kind of has the best of all worlds, and also with cleanup too, because you're not cleaning up every night. So and there's just some satisfaction that just comes from eating a prepared meal where you kind of the macros already, you thought things through, and you finish that. There's just something so satisfying about that, because it's just
No
like you don't have to think,
load.
no cognitive load at all, and you just know that you've done the right thing.
Yeah, that's what that's why Steve Jobs, I guess, wore the same thing every day. He says he doesn't have to think about what he wears. He actually too used to get the same Mercedes every 6 months, and he did it every 6 months because he didn't have to change the license plates or something in California, something like that. So
I think he would famously go without a license plate, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I think that was it. I think you could go without a license plate every 6 months. So he just got a new Mercedes every 6 months. Pretty wild. Just to change things up a little bit, I know that you're a big fan of red light therapy. So what made you get into that?
Around 2018, I just quit the startup, and I was just trying to figure out all the things that I could do to improve my health and get that inflammation down. And so came across red light therapy as one of the modalities to help. What really sold me on it is I saw this study, and I can send it to you when we're done. It was an N=1 with his MD PhD, and he'd spent so much time in China, and he developed so many wrinkles, crow's feet around his eyes. And he did this experiment where he would use green tea because it has the EGCG in it, and he would blot his face with it with 15 minutes, and then he did red light. And I saw the before and after of this, and all of his wrinkles were just gone. And I couldn't believe it. And so I was like, I really want to try that. And so I tried it myself, and it worked for me. And there was just something about seeing this visual change in skin. And I was thinking, if it can do that to the skin, what is it doing, to the rest of my body? It's got to be doing, great stuff for the inside of my body. And but there was the skin that really sold me on it.
That's interesting because, I heard Andrew Huberman say in a podcast, I'm not sure if it was last year or this year, but how much your skin health reflects your immune health, right? And like, I've had Dr. Roger Schultz on the floor, or Holt. I hope I'm saying his name right. One of those two is right, I think, anyway. But anyways, he's an MD, and he was talking a lot about red light and how they were using it for like treating COVID patients, and how people would get so much better with the red light therapy. And so, we know that it's really good for your immune system overall. And, I do think there is a strong link, like Dr. Andrew Huberman was saying, between your skin health and your immune system. But yeah, that's pretty wild. So you use the red light therapy, and then tell us a little bit about the serum that you were using. It was EGCG, like green tea kind of serum.
Yeah, it was just regular green tea, and you brew it. I believe it was at 90 Celsius for 15 minutes. And what it does is when you do red light therapy, there's a little bit of reactive oxygen species as a result. And so EGCG is antioxidant, and it would just kind of buffer the reactive oxygen species and kind of speed the recovery there. So just kind of speed up the loop a little bit.
Got you. And so was it a serum that you used, or was it?
I actually just brewed green tea, and I dip a rag in it and just put the rag over my face for 15 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I wonder if a compounding pharmacy, or maybe you don't even have to go to that. Maybe they're on Amazon. If I'm not sure if people have like serums with EGCG in them. I remember seeing though once, I think there was something about, maybe it was a mechanistic study, so I might be overblowing it, but there was something about EGCG and testosterone. It may have been with DHT, or maybe something with the receptors. And then it kind of got me a little bit, I guess, worrisome about, using it, but topically is completely different, So, yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah, I just could not believe the results. I can send you a picture. I have a picture on X that I can send you.
Okay. Yeah, no, that'd be awesome. Yeah. And thanks for sharing that. That's something that I might have to try myself. So I know that, you're into, obviously, for lack of a better term, like biohacking, increasing your cognition, all that kind of stuff. And for a while there, I think this is a while ago now, you're into nicotine, but you stopped it completely. So what made you start it and why did you stop it?
I had like a brief period there where the doctor I was working with actually recommended like really low dose nicotine, but the problem was I realized pretty quickly how addictive it was, and stopped it pretty quick. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that I have seen some studies with some benefits of low dose nicotine, but it's one of those things where it's just so addictive that um, it may not be worth it for most people.
Same thing happened to me. I was using, 1 or 2 grams a day, like continuously. And then, eventually, sometimes I was using 3. And then the thing that bothered me was that I didn't like going without it, like,
Yeah.
because once I didn't have it, um, you know, I didn't like that feeling I was getting. I felt like, oh, like, just like, say if you were stopping coffee, you get that little bit of like irritability, a little bit of a headache, and just not feeling your best. And like, you're just kind of thinking about, when's my next, coffee going to be? When am I going to have, that next nicotine hit? And so I stopped it, completely for a while. And then now what I'll do is like once a week, like before this podcast, like I had 1 gram and then I just had like another half a gram during it, but I'll never ever use more than 2 grams at a time. And I'll never use it more than 2 days a week. And
That's a great way to do it.
and if there's a week where, I'm away on vacation, like no nicotine at all, so I can easily go without it and I'm not looking for it. I'm just using it purely as like a nootropic, like 1 to 2 times a week maximum. And I'm never going over 2 milligrams. But I think like, even if you are, using 1 to 2 milligrams a day, and I'm sure there probably are benefits, in some studies anyway, that show that there are, benefits to daily use. I just don't want to be addicted to anything,
Yeah.
And so I'm already, addicted to coffee, like addicted to caffeine. And so I don't want to, get myself like basically addicted to anything more. One stimulant is enough. You incorporate another stimulant, then you're addicted to 2 things. And it's just not, something that I don't want to have like nicotine mints on me everywhere. Or if I, forget them, that like, I'm going to be irritable. So yeah, I just felt like it wasn't worth it either. And I just kind of basically stopped it, essentially cold turkey. And then, and it wasn't as bad as I thought, but after a few days, it kind of goes away. But I'm glad I got rid of that habit.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I am too. Yeah. It's amazing how quickly it sneaks up on you too.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of like overblown that, a little bit with regards to, the nicotine. Although I think Andrew Huberman is he encouraged it a little bit initially, and then he sort of reversed his stance. And I know he doesn't use it or hasn't used it in years now. And I've seen him tweet out, before, like, listen, guys, like nicotine is addictive. So, people who are telling you otherwise, like, don't listen to them. So you're this like tech veteran turned like health hacker. How do you view health like differently than say somebody else who doesn't have a tech background?
That's a great question. I've actually kind of recently realized this, but I hadn't really thought about it. But one thing that I did in tech for probably about 5 years is I did almost nothing but run experiments. And so these were, A/B experiments that were done in our software, and you do them to see, what works better. I probably ran about, certainly over 1,000 experiments during that time, probably a little bit more. But one thing that it taught me, really well is how to construct a good experiment, how to analyze it afterwards, how to look at subgroups. It just taught me so much about experimentation. And I think one thing that I realized was how much that translated into reading studies. And, really combing through the methods section, looking at, the statistical analysis to see if it's accurate. So I think it's probably one thing. And then I think from that experience and experimentation, just doing self-experiments as well. So I do a lot of those. And I think that those, if properly constructed, properly supervised, with a huge emphasis on safety, can be just invaluable to determine what's going to work personally for you.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta, if you call yourself, a scientist, you have to experiment yourself on a little bit sometimes, And so, it's interesting how you approach the experiments that you're doing on your health, similarly to the experiments that you were doing previously in tech, and how they, translate it. And I've chatted with other, engineers before who are, now kind of, health gurus, for lack of a better term. And, I love the way that they think. It's very, very interesting. And so I got to ask you this then, like in terms of like trackers, are you using anything right now, like an Oura ring, or are there any special trackers that you use that you find to be particularly helpful?
I used to use an Oura, and this is nothing about the company. I actually loved it. But one thing that I started realizing is that I was getting a little bit too obsessed with that number. And I was starting to get anxiety before going to sleep because I didn't want that score to be bad. And after a while, I felt like it was kind of impacting my sleep. Just like I shouldn't be stressing about going to sleep thinking about the score. So I no longer use that. Basically, all I use right now for tracking, I've got in-body scale at home. It's just a floor scale, not one of the high-end models. But I use that to track weight and body composition. It's really good. I don't think it's accurate, in terms of like DEXA quality or anything, but it shows the trend for sure. And that's what I look at. My phone for steps, and then chronometer for just what I'm eating and calories. And that's about it. I've just tried to keep things really, really simple in terms of tracking.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure, just because obviously, with the tech background, I wasn't sure if there was any like, crazy apps or wearables that you were wearing that, other people maybe weren't aware of. Go ahead.
Oh, for a while there, I feel like I was using almost everything I could find.
Yeah. And to be honest, I've had the same issue sometimes with the Aura. Like, I want that high sleep score kind of thing. And, if you look at it in the morning and it's like, shit, it's not as high as I thought it was going to be. Then it's
exactly.
So it's something that I haven't taken it off yet, but I've certainly, thought about doing it. And I don't know why I haven't. I guess I'm just, I don't know if you call it an addiction or whatever it is, but I certainly don't want to take it off, but I think I'm going to have to at some point, just to kind of give myself a little bit of a break. And I got a feeling if I do take it off, I'm going to be like, I could probably go without this. It's not something else that I need to kind of track at this point. In terms of these other things coming down the line, like there's so many things in terms of like gene editing, and like there's follistatin, gene therapy. Like there's so many other therapies that are coming down the line in terms of like health. And like you look at someone like, say, like Brian Johnson, who just basically utilizes every possible tool out there to, biohack or increase his health. Like, is there some kind of like line that you always draw, or are there some things that you are very interested in using?
Gosh, what an exciting time we live in with everything that is coming out. What's kind of funny is I feel like I've gone a little bit the other direction. And so I just kind of focus on just walking as much as I can. Just the benefits of walking, in my opinion, that's probably the biggest lever we can pull, just because it impacts so many things, and you can do so much volume of walking without really impacting your fatigue. So I just try to focus on walking, lifting consistently, and then just hitting my micros and macros and caloric targets. And I came to that conclusion because I got things pretty dialed in. And so I know that if I do those things, my blood work is going to look great. My body composition is going to be great. And, my LDL will look acceptable. So I just kind of try to focus on just those basics but just kind of executing them relentlessly.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm more or less, the same way with that. Like I'm not, looking forward to doing anything like, crazy, like gene editing or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if there was a way that you could somehow get that sleep gene that Jocko Willink has, where like I think only like 1% of people or something have it, where you only need to sleep like 5 hours a night. If that was like 100% safe and you could do it, I would be the first person to sign up for that. Because I mean, right now, I want, I'm actually good with not getting 8, but I like to get about 7. If I don't get 6.5, that's definitely affects performance. Usually pretty good even on 6.5. 7 would be optimal for me, but man, I'd love to be one of those people, who just needs 5. But there's some people probably listening to this who are like, man, I'd love to be one of those people who just need 6.5 to 7 like you. So maybe I shouldn't be too greedy, but yeah, that would kind of be, I guess, the dream thing for me if I was ever going to, do anything drastic, would be like if they made gene editing safe, the CRISPR is what we're talking about for people who aren't aware. That would be the thing I think that would give me, the biggest advantage, because you're basically just getting an extra 2 hours or more in your day, which would be incredible.
That would be amazing. Yeah, I would love that. Jocko's so lucky.
Yeah, I think there's only like, like I said, like 1 or 2% of people, who actually have that gene. And it seems like it works for him. Like I really think he does only sleep like 5 hours a night. And I'm pretty sure that they've, figured out that a lot of people who are Navy SEALs, one of the big things is their ability to thrive on like sleep deprivation, because that's one of the things that they use to weed people out. We always think about these guys who are big and strong, and certainly there's lots of them, and Jocko is one of them as well. But the ability to just not sleep is something that seems to get the SEALs kind of through it versus the ones who can't get through it, more or less.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I know I only got you there for, another 5 minutes or so. So, before we, close things off, like you got this unbelievable before and after pic. So everyone, could see that. That's certainly visible. But what would be the most kind of like invisible thing that's happened to you during this transformation that you've gone through?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. I think probably the most invisible thing is trust in myself. It really changed the relationship that I have with myself, which I wasn't really expecting that to be a result. But just knowing that that I can make a promise to myself, I can keep it, that I can keep the fitness up, that I can keep kind of the discipline and the schedule up, that has helped me in so many other areas. And I just feel happier and more content.
Yeah, just more at peace overall.
A lot more at peace. And I think maybe one of the reasons why is, when I didn't have the body composition that I wanted, I think that there were probably like a lot of background stress as a result of that. I'd make certain food choices and say I probably shouldn't be eating that, or I should probably be working out. So I think that I probably got into a state where I was always breaking, kind of contracts with myself. So yeah, that's been probably one of the most surprising things that's kind of invisible, is just feeling a lot more at peace.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's good to know, like, when you're able to do the things that you want to do and become the person that you want to be, then, it's certainly going to translate more into just like a better, body composition overall. It's just going to be a better mindset and just better mental health in general. So I know our hours is like coming up to a close there now, but what's on the rise for you in the future? And can you tell everybody your Twitter handle and anything else that you want to chat about?
Yeah. So Twitter handle is just at Greg Mushen, GregMushen. And what I'm starting to do is starting to do more long form. What I've noticed on X is I've just been running into space constraints. I've been wanting to give more detail for different analyses that I've been doing, and there just isn't enough room in threads. So I started a Substack. It's called Dark Lab,
Awesome.
and I'm just starting that. And so Dark Lab, it kind of sounds a little subversive, but it's really kind of an ode to labs when they first started, in the 17th and 18th century, when they'd just be, one person at candlelight attacking a big problem. Galileo in his studio grinding glass and making, astronomy discoveries or discovery of electromagnetism. I think that we're in this amazing time in history where, we have AI, and AI can just be a huge accelerant in my mind, from analyzing the literature that we have out there and helping to connect the dots to the point where humans can start making connections. So that's kind of where the name came from. It's that ode to kind of like old school science, just doing it for the love of the discovery, and but with a new tool set.
That's awesome, man. Well, I'm definitely going to have to check out that Substack. So looking forward to doing that. And thank you so much again for everything you do and for coming on the show. I got through most of the questions, certainly not everything that I wanted to ask you. So I might have to have you back on sometime. But thanks so much again for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And as always, I'll be back with another episode soon.